Reagan was elected to the presidency, he installed Louis Giuffrida as head of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Giuffrida was an old Cold Warrior from Reagan's California days whose specialty was suppression of unrest and dissent. Giuffrida, North, and George Bush began to turn FEMA into an instrument of domestic anti-terrorism.
You're dealing with a group of people in the Reagan administration who equated political dissent with treason and who cannot differentiate between emergency procedures, which I think everyone agrees are necessary, and suppressing political dissent. And with North and Poindexter and Casey, you had a group of people who saw Americans who disagree with them as the enemy.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster?
Mr. Chairman.
I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was, but I wanted to get his
May I most
confirmation.
respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm certain arrangements can be made for an executive session.
And tragically, the only member who got close was Jack Brooks, and he was stopped by the chairman.
And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to wonder exactly what President George W. Bush knew about the attack, and when he knew it. According to the official White House version, it was at this moment in a Florida classroom that Bush learned the second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that the U.S. was under attack. But here's what George Bush himself said almost 3 months later when asked about September 11th.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And it said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there and didn't have much time to think about it.
Now, wait a minute. George Bush was told about the second plane while he was inside the classroom. So you just heard him describe seeing the first plane crash on television that day. But that's impossible. No one saw the first plane crash on TV on September the 11th because the videotape of it didn't surface until the next day.
Dr. Rice, would you please rise and raise your right hand? You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
In April 2004, public pressure finally forced the White House to allow Dr. Rice to testify before the 9/11 Commission to answer questions about the PDB and the nature of warnings given the administration.
The threat reporting that we received in the spring and summer of 2001 was not specific as to time, nor place, nor manner of attack. Almost all of the reports focused on al-Qaeda activities outside the United States.
This sat in stark contrast to the warnings well documented in Thompson's timeline.
What the August 6th PDB said, and perhaps I should read it to you.
We would be happy to have it declassified in full.
When she was testifying, one Ben Venice was really trying to get into the nitty-gritty.
Did you tell the President at any time prior to August 6th of the existence of al-Qaeda cells in the United States?
First, let me just make certain.
If you could just answer that question, first, because I only have a very limited...
I understand, Commissioner, but it's
Did you tell the
important
President?
that I also address...
It wasn't like a trial. You couldn't grill these people till you got the answer.
I really don't remember, Commissioner, whether I discussed this with the President.
Just let me move on, if I may.
There were no specifics.
What about August 6th? What did August 6th memo say? and then she would start going off.
It was historical information based on old reporting. There was no new threat information, and it did not, in fact, warn of any coming attacks inside the United States.
And what was the title of the memo?
I believe the title was Bin Laden Determined to Attack Inside the United States. Now, the PDB...
Thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Wexler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, over the past month, startling revelations have come forward that specifically relate to your conduct prior to 9/11 and in the run-up to the war in Iraq. A recently released study by the Nonpartisan Center for Public Integrity revealed that you, along with President Bush and top administration officials, made a total of 935 false public statements in an orchestrated attempt to take this nation to war. Here's a stack of these false statements right here, all 935 of them. This study has found that you, Madam Secretary, made 56 false statements to the American people, where you repeatedly pump up the case that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and exaggerate the so-called relationship between Iraq and Al-Qaeda. Madam Secretary, can you please tell us, isn't it true that you had intelligence that cast doubt on your repeated claims that Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction?
No, it's not true, Congressman.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
And that we will in fact find weapons or evidence of weapons programs that are conclusive.
I don't think we'll discover anything myself.
It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north.
Well, first of all, I haven't lied.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
Talking about lies and your allegation that there was bulletproof evidence of ties between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. Was that a lie?
Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised.
Our people are going to find out the truth, and the truth will say that this intelligence is good intelligence, no doubt in my mind.
I don't know anybody that I can think of who has contended that the Iraqis had nuclear weapons.
And we believe he has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons.
Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb.
We cannot wait for the final proof. He's got him. He's got him. The smoking gun. He's got him. That could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Colin Powell didn't lie.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
Our people are going to find out the truth.
I have not suggested there's a connection between Iraq and 9/11.
You have said in the past that it was, quote, pretty well confirmed.
No, I never said that.
Okay. I think that is...
That's absolutely not. What I said was, it's been pretty well confirmed that he did go to Prague and he did meet with a senior official of the Iraqi intelligence service.
Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists or help them develop their own. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
He said there were three main reasons for going to war in Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths, spent enormous sums, taken great risks to build and keep weapons of mass destruction.
The claim that Iraq was sponsoring terrorists would have attacked us on 9/11.
Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained.
And that Iraq had purchased nuclear materials from Niger.
The regime is seeking a nuclear bomb.
All three of those turned out to be false.
First, just if I might correct a misperception, I don't think we ever said, at least I know I didn't say, that there was a direct connection between September the 11th and Saddam Hussein.
Who does the president think he's effing kidding?
Of course, it was information that was mistaken.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
With all due respect, I think if you look back at the key judgments of the intelligence estimate about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, you will see that those judgments supported the views of many intelligence agencies worldwide, the views of the United Nations inspectors, that Iraq must have been hiding something. Our own intelligence estimates said that Iraq had reconstituted its biological weapons program, its chemical weapons program.
This is a response to Zach's video, Why Invade Iraq?
I'm going to point out some of the problems with it.
Saddam Hussein is obviously not a nice man.
Well, I'm glad we can agree on that.
Yeah, now we can agree on it, right? In the 1980s, it was a different story. In 1982, the U.S. State Department removed Iraq from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. It also fought off efforts by the U.S. Congress to put it back on the list in 1985. So there's your concern for human rights. In fact, the concern was so great that they had the goal of increasing U.S. exports. The reason given to, quote, put us in a better position to deal with Iraq regarding its human rights records. That's what the State Department said it with a straight face back in the 1980s. When Saddam attacked Iran, committing a war crime, what country supported him? You know, you guys have a convenient memory. Also, notice the points that I'm making, they're very rarely pointed out in mainstream media. You heard over and over again how Saddam, quote, attacked his own people, or killed his own people. How often did you hear with our help? And this is what you should think about. If Saddam is bad, what does that make the U.S. government? They were partners in war crimes. You can find this information at my website, representativepress.org. On there you can see that I have a transcript of where Scott Ritter and Richard Butler were on the Donahue Show. And by the way, the Donahue Show's ratings were really good. There's a reason he was canceled, and that's because he was showing too much of this information before the Iraq War. And MSNBC was behind doing the war. That's just a fact. On that show, Scott Ritter pointed out that the former head of Iraqi intelligence was told him that the U.S. advisors were sitting there as Iraq planned the inclusion of chemical weapons in the Anfal offensive.
Into the town of Halabash, where the dead still lie in the streets. Iraq denies using chemical weapons. It says Iran carried out the attack. Whoever's to blame, the victims are clear, civilians who were caught up in one of the world's most unforgiving wars. Some scenes in this report are gruesome and disturbing.
The Iranians flew representatives of the world's press across the now silent battlefield. They'd invited reporters and cameramen to witness what they describe as the worst atrocity against civilians since this war began. The destination, the Kurdish Iraqi city of Halabash, 15 miles across the border. A week ago, the Iranians captured it. Within days, they claim, Baghdad ordered it to be destroyed with chemical weapons, even though 50,000 of their own people were still living there. As we drove along the deserted main street, the extent of damage and death became clear. The people, the families we found lying all around had not been injured. They'd been poisoned by chemical bombs and shells containing cyanide, mustard, and other nerve gases. The only mercy was that with cyanide, death would have been instant. There would have been no time for suffering. The family living here had fled to their cellar when they heard the first explosion. They would have been unaware that the lethal gases would penetrate every part of their home.
Why would the Iraqis do it to their own people?
They did it to us also. But the strategy is to do it to his own people. To us is okay, we are enemies, okay, we are fighting together. But why to his own people?
There were countless heartbreaking sights which told stories of how parents had desperately tried to shelter their young from the invisible vapors.